All right, critics of the wall have been using the word medieval to describe it.
Donald Trump wants a medieval border wall and is trying to force us to pay a $5 billion plus ransom note.
There's no reason to have a medieval response to a 21st century problem.
The president campaigned, you will recall, on building a medieval-style border wall, and of course, the promise was that Mexico would pay for it.
Okay, let's bring in Texas Republican Congressman Dan Creshaw and the Pima County Sheriff in Arizona, Mark Napier, who credits himself with first coining that phrase, the medieval comparison, a couple years ago, and he may have had a change of heart. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, Sheriff, I want to start with you because we had that little montage there of a number of folks using medieval to describe the wall in a disparaging way. You've used it. You may have launched this whole idea of using it. Have you changed your mind?
Well, Shannon, I've never changed my mind about the utility of physical barriers to secure our border. That's never been the issue for me. 2 years ago, all we were hearing is we're going to build a wall, and the inference was that it would be all 2,000 miles of our international border. Well, that's simply not feasible. And to simply build a wall and walk away from it would, in fact, be a medieval solution to what is a very complex and dynamic problem. Over the past couple of years, the president has evolved his position greatly. In his address on Tuesday night, he talked about technology, human resources, and physical barriers. And we're no longer talking about the idea of securing the border all 2,000 miles with a 30-foot-high concrete wall. So this has evolved. The president's listened to the experts, and I have always fully supported physical barriers because they make sense. They have great utility from an operational and tactical standpoint in a lot of places, a lot of locations on our border.
Yeah, you're there on the front line, so you would have a much better assessment than most of us. Now, Congressman, first of all, I want to mention that you are among those who has said to the federal government, withhold my pay for now while we're figuring this all out. You want to be in the same place that federal employees who are now...
Yeah, I think that's only right.
You know, they're on the receiving end of these decisions. So I wanted to note that, but also I want to read something because you have been doing a lot of debating this week with folks about who think the wall is not going to work or there are problems with it. This is quoting a Virginia Tech medieval professor, says this, the headline, Trump says medieval walls worked. They didn't. They say, calling the proposed 700 to 1,200 mile border wall medieval is deeply misleading because walls in the actual European Middle Ages simply did not work the way Trump apparently thinks they did. If anything, their true function may speak to Trump's intentions. Poor tools of defense, medieval walls had more to do with reassuring those who lived inside them than with dividing self from others.
It's an interesting academic perspective, but then we're affronted with reality, right? And so they are meant to make people inside feel better. It's like Trump said, you know, we care about the people we love inside, and that's why we have these. And a physical barrier is a part of a multifaceted solution. And I wrote about this in the Wall Street Journal today. It's about 234 miles of physical barriers. That's what the plan calls for. It's about 75 extra immigration judges on the border to enhance the capacity of enrolling people here. It's about 750 more Border Patrol agents. It's more detention beds so that we can house all the families that are coming across. Remember, the reason this is a crisis, too, is because there's far more families actually coming across, far more women and children than we ever had before. That's why it's a humanitarian crisis. That's why President Obama himself, standing in front of the White House, had once said it is a humanitarian crisis on the border. And we are talking about technology. We're talking about more technology to detect drugs coming into ports of entry. This isn't some medieval solution. It is an actual, realistic, reasonable solution. It's multifaceted in nature. And the funny part is it's actually what Democrats often talk about on the House floor. They're saying, no, it's not just physical barriers, it's all these other things. We should have a mix. And I say, don't you realize that's actually our plan? Like, what are you arguing against? Don't argue against an idea that doesn't exist. It's like the sheriff said. Originally, there was talk about a grand 2,000-mile border wall. That doesn't work. It doesn't work in a lot of places in Texas. Okay, we have multifaceted solutions. That's what this is about. The politics of it have gotten really ugly.
Well, and speaking of politics, Sheriff, I want to play something from one of the top Democrats in the Senate, Dick Durbin, talking about the efficacy of these walls, and get your reaction.
Well, listen, there isn't a single fence or wall that you build that can't be overcome with a tunnel or a ladder or some other approach. Let's be real about it. That's why we have insisted on the Democratic side of being smart when it comes to border security.
All right, I want you both to weigh in on that, but Sheriff, you first.
The senator needs to come down to my part of the world. Physical barriers do work. They've always worked. We have vehicle intrusion barriers in my county They have great efficacy. Now, of course, we're always going to have any physical barrier backed up with technology and human resources, because the drug cartels have infinite resources. They are entrepreneurs. As we plug one hole in it, they're going to try another. So they'll always try to defeat whatever we place there. So they'll always have to be backed up by technology and human resources. We'll have to move human resources closer to the border. So it's a flawed argument, and I would invite the Democrats to quit using the term a medieval solution. I might have coined that phrase. It is no longer applicable. What we have, as Congressman Creshaw absolutely correctly pointed out, is a multifaceted approach to a very dynamic and challenging problem. That's what we're talking about today, and that has great efficacy, and it will work.
Yeah, and Congressman, in your piece that you wrote today, you talk about the fact that you don't just abandon things because there may be some possible ways to challenge them.
Right.
But
and we have about 400,000 people crossing the border. That's just apprehended every year, so that doesn't include all the people that probably cross. So the idea is to mitigate this to the best extent possible. Just because somebody can put forth a ton of resources to try and maybe dig under it, or use special equipment and really special training to try and get over a large wall the way this is, just because that's possible and just because some could maybe do it, doesn't mean it's not an enormous mitigating factor for the vast majority of people. And the solution is certainly not, well, just have nothing so they can easily walk across. I mean, that's not a solution at all. And you know, and I almost have to laugh saying it, right? Because it sounds crazy. Like, of course we would have to have something there to mitigate it, just like the sheriff is saying. And I wish Democrats wouldn't just dismiss it in this kind of smug manner, and it's without any evidence, without any reasoning behind it. The idea is to dismiss this as an obviously stupid idea. Of course it's not a stupid idea. And in fact, I don't really have a problem with the idea of medieval solutions. The point is that it's been around for a long time because these things do actually work. You know, and they're part of the solution. They're not the only solution, but part of it.
I want to ask you, too, The Hill reporting today that the White House had looked at $13.9 billion in funding approved by Congress as part of a disaster response bill to use for building the wall. My understanding is you've had some conversations with Mick Mulvaney about that, because there have been objections across the aisle from both sides about that possibility.
Of course, especially as I'm from Houston, and Harvey relief funds are a big priority of mine. We couldn't possibly support money being taken away from that. So, if we do get to this point where he's declaring a national emergency, we have to be very careful about that. I really want to see Congress come to a solution here. I think there is plenty of room for political negotiation. Let's keep in mind that Republicans have come down from the President Trump's giant wall down to 200 miles of it, a very reasonable amount, come down from $25 billion to $5.7 billion. We are negotiating, but we have to have a partner in negotiations. These are not unreasonable conversations to have.
Well, we'll see where those conversations go, if they continue, if those conversations are being had. Congressman, thank you. Sheriff, thank you both very much for serving our country in your different ways and for weighing in on this tonight. Great to have you both.
Thank you.